Alcohol impairs nutrient absorption at the gut level. The gut is connected to literally everything. I woke up the next morning with the worst anxiety in the entire world. I don't know why I keep doing this when every time I drink, I'm not having a good time, especially the next day. I look back at some of the pictures of me from college. I feel like I look 10 years older in college than I do now at almost 30 years old. What we know about alcohol is that it might help you fall asleep. However, when we look at statistics like that, people don't actually get deep, high quality sleep.
For me, as someone who is recently diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic and really saw the challenges of managing alcohol with your blood sugar.
65% of Gen Z is drinking less. I mean, there's a huge generational shift between our generation and this next generation.
If the trend stays the same, is going to be the first year that there's a higher percentage of Americans who are choosing not to drink as compared to Americans who are choosing to drink.
I mean, this is why you're seeing this explosion in these other functional drinks.
For us, adding these adaptogenic mushrooms and other ingredients, that's not only going to take away the bad, but add something good and beneficial for your body. I think that's why this resonates with so many people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Gut Check podcast. Today I'm sitting down with two friends, Zack and Taylor Grasso, who are the founders of Pesche, which is a functional mocktail company. Generations are changing and there are more and more people that are turning away from alcohol, drinking less alcohol. We explain the impact that alcohol has on the body, the gut microbiome, our hormones, sleep, stress, and more. I think you're going to love this conversation and learn a lot. So let us know what you think and enjoy the episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Gut Check podcast. Today I am joined by two friends that I haven't seen in a while and very excited to chat with them and catch up, Taylor Grasso and Zack Grasso, who are the founders of Pesche, a new functional mocktail beverage company. So Taylor and Zack, thank you both for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. We're excited to be here.
Let's just dive in. So Taylor, you're a registered dietitian. You've done a ton of work on social media, wonderful practice that you've created. And then you guys decide as a married couple, similar to Marco and I, which we love and appreciate as well, to kind of dive into business together. So tell us about the origin story of Pesche and where the idea came from.
Yeah, so the idea really came from Zack and I drinking less overall ourselves. So I've been sober from alcohol for a little over 2 years now, which, like, granted, I was pregnant for 9 of those months. But still, I even post having a baby, I still just don't really have an interest in drinking alcohol again. Mine kind of happened a couple of years ago. It was New Year's Eve. I had 2 espresso martinis and I woke up the next morning with the worst anxiety in the entire world. And I just thought to myself, like, I don't know why I keep doing this when every time I drink, I'm not having a good time, especially the next day. Not necessarily not having a good time in the moment. It's more so just the following day, I regretted it every single time. And so I just kind of stopped drinking cold turkey. And that was the beginning of a new year. And I haven't drank since then. But the idea of Pesche kind of came from that concept because as I stopped drinking, and I was going to bars and restaurants and going out with my friends, because obviously you still live a social life, even if you're someone who doesn't drink. Yeah. We kept running into the fact that the non-alcoholic beverages that were available were either boring, still really high in calories, still really high in sugar, all of these different things that the reason I had stopped drinking and also why Zack kind of had cut back on drinking was to promote our overall health and well-being, to help ourselves feel better. And so we were like, well, why would we choose these options that are still providing no benefit to our body? And the concept actually originated from something called the Sleepy Girl mocktail, if you've seen that on TikTok at all. So it's this combination of magnesium glycinate, which is a form of magnesium that helps to ignite the parasympathetic nervous system, or the part of our nervous system that helps us to calm down, unwind, relax, all of those good things, and then tart cherry juice. I'd been a big proponent of tart cherry juice as a registered dietitian prior to the Sleepy Girl mocktail going viral. It helps to naturally create melatonin in your body so you don't become dependent on it, which is great. So it can help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer. It also has a ton of antioxidant properties, so great for recovery, which your body does a lot of while you're sleeping. So combining those two things with something like a poppy beverage, for example, was what a lot of people on social media were doing. I was also doing it myself. So I said to Zach, imagine if you could get something like this in a can that has significantly lower sugar, because the reality is tertiary juice is great, but it is still high. It is naturally occurring sugar because it's just the fruit, but it is still really high in sugar to drink right before you go to bed. But then as we were thinking through that, we were like, well, what about all these other instances that we
Yeah.
go out and about and we don't have a mocktail option that we like or that we want to drink in those settings? Could we create a functional beverage that fits these different settings where we oftentimes find ourselves drinking? So that's what kind of created that premise of the 3 different flavors and the 3 different sensations, is that we wanted one to kind of do that sleepy girl mocktail, or a lot of people have like a glass of wine right before bed, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what the sleepy girl mocktail, or unwind is what our actual can is called, emulates. And then we have kind of a middle ground, which we compare to like a beer or a high noon or a seltzer. Think about those situations like tailgates. Zach drinks them on the golf course a lot. That one's called kickback. And then we have one that's kind of meant for those settings where you're socializing, you're out and about with friends, has a low amount of caffeine. It helps you kind of energize, focus, socialize, all of those great things. And that one is called lift. So that's kind of like where the premise came from. And then I will allow I will allow for Zach to kind of go into his side of that story, because Zach also received a type 1 diabetes diagnosis during us coming up with the concept of Pesche. But I want to make sure I leave space for him to kind of talk a little bit about how that also influenced the creation of the beverage.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like, I don't know if fortuitous timing would be the exact term for it, but we had the concept of Pesche kind of in our minds, hadn't really done anything besides come up with the concept and put like a really basic slide deck together to present to like family and friends and be like, hey, we want to raise money for this idea, this and that. And then during that time period is when I found out that I had type 1 diabetes. And luckily, I'm married to a dietitian. So first of all, lucked out in that department. But to begin with, I was never, or I shouldn't say never, I did my fair share of drinking back in college. But as college ended and we got into the real world, kind of reevaluated, what alcohol looked like to me. And so I cut back on drinking, but I was still very much, and still to this day, I'm a social drinker. So I'll drink at like weddings, tailgates, occasionally golf course, bachelor parties, etc., stuff like that, but still here and there. So it was a great option, to come up with for me as someone who is recently diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic, and really saw the challenges of managing alcohol with your blood sugar, and the effects of that. Because I think the first time I had like a tequila soda post-diagnosis, my blood sugar was like straight, and then all the way down, was getting into low dangerous levels, was eating a bunch of sugar to try to correct it. So I was like, oh shoot, like this is not good. This is not fun to manage. So I was like, this is really great timing that we're coming up with a concept like this, where I still have a really cool beverage to drink that maybe kind of emulates like an alcoholic beverage, like a high noon, et cetera, something like that, seltzer, but still can manage my blood sugar more effectively, not have to worry about alcohol tanking it, and giving me a little bit more confidence to, I guess, socially drink too. I should mention that like I said, I'm a social drinker. Taylor's more sober. I'm what you would call sober curious. So I love to have these, but every once in a while too, like I'll throw a little tequila in here as well to make it a little mixed drink. So I think these are great for either way you want to go. And I think having Taylor's sober lifestyle, these are great, or having my sober curious lifestyle presents a great option for both.
Well, and it's so part of the, discussion I want to have here is obviously the health implications, that, are just being communicated over and over again. Zach, your health implications, obviously type 1 diabetes, that's like incredibly specific and very important, right? That's something that obviously cannot be ignored. But just more broadly, I mean, I don't know if you guys know off the top of your head the stats, but it's something like 65% of Gen Z is drinking less. I mean, there's a huge generational shift between, I believe we're all millennials on this call, but like millennials, certainly, older generations, millennials, our generation, and this next generation. I mean, this is why you're seeing this explosion in these other functional drinks for whatever reasons, right? But let's talk about that a little bit, because I think, as you're explaining this, whether it be to an investor, whether it be to someone who's, in media, whatever, I mean, everyone's kind of aware of this. And I think some people are still kind of learning about this different mindset that this
Mhm.
generation has around drinking. So I don't know if either of you want to tackle that, but how is this Gen Z, this next generation, really thinking about drinking? Because it is very different than the generations before.
Yeah, and one of those statistics has been in our pitch deck that we've updated the years that we've been working on this. So this has been almost 3 years in the
Yeah.
making now for it to really come to fruition. And I remember when we first started, I want to say it was like 37%. And this is not just Gen Z. This is like all of Americans who are of drinking age. It was like 37% when we first started, like going through our pitch deck, were choosing not to drink alcohol.
Hmm.
And then as the years have gone on, with the trend that that percentage has taken over the course of the last 3 years, 2026, if the trend stays the same, is going to be the first year that there's a higher percentage of Americans who are choosing not to drink as compared to
Wow.
Americans who are choosing to drink. And now, once again, like Zach said, we're not here to like shame anybody for drinking alcohol. I think it's more just people actually realizing the health
Mhm.
implications that alcohol has and how it negatively impacts your body. Because the unfortunate thing about alcohol is while it is very fun, a lot of the times, it is a toxin, right? So it does negatively impact a lot of different functions within our body. And I know obviously we'll get into the gut microbiome and gut health a little bit further, but that is one of the biggest implications that alcohol can have on our body. And as we know, the gut is connected to literally everything.
Yep.
So I think that because Gen Z has so much more access to information,
Mhm.
right? Even as millennials, I feel like we were kind of on the cusp of the rise of social media, like into high school, college, all of those times. Like, yes, social media was a big deal, but not like it is to the extent now that where Gen Z has access to so much information. And same with like even AI, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's just so much out there. I think that because of that, they are just a generation who is a lot more conscious of their health and wellness. And I
Mhm.
also just think health and wellness culture is something that's a lot larger than it was when we were younger,
Yeah.
which I think is a fantastic thing. I think it's
Yeah.
great that younger generations are starting to focus more on their health and wellness from that perspective of like total wellness, right?
Mhm.
So I think that that's a big reason why that generation specifically is just that access to information and also just a bigger focus on overall health and wellness. But it's also just very interesting to note that this might be the first year that Americans in general, so that's of all generations, there's
Mhm.
going to be people who are drinking less or not drinking at all as compared to the people who are drinking.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the point of the story and why I wanted to have you guys on. It's like, there's a lot of awareness, I think, among younger generations of like what they're swapping their drinks for, but then there's just this incredible opportunity for these functional beverages, and you're seeing it left and right. You guys, one of the things that I love about your business too is that you're not coastal, you're in Des Moines, right? You're in the heartland of where these health and wellness trends aren't the first to hit.
Mhm.
So let's talk about that regionally, kind of what you guys are seeing, because you're in Des Moines, Iowa. It is tailgate, kind of central, especially this time of year in the fall. But, what are you guys seeing as just kind of American preferences change? Has there been like a, very welcome reception of functional mocktails? Do people understand the adaptogens and how they work?
I would say it's definitely some education required, which we knew
Mhm.
that going into kind of this industry and creating the beverage that we were creating, especially with creating the different sensations, right?
Yeah.
Because we have three different flavors, but then each of them has a trio of functional ingredients that provide a different sensation to the body, is what we like to say.
Yep.
So I think that especially with, Zach has one of our cans, but we have a little mushroom on there. So one of kind of the key functional ingredients that we use are adaptogenic
Mm.
mushrooms. That has definitely been one of the biggest ones that we oftentimes have to explain to people
Yeah.
because we're like, they're not psychedelic. You are not going to have
Yep.
any sort of psychoactive reaction. And then same with like, obviously there's a massive rise in terms of the THC and CBD beverage
Yes.
industry. So kind of explaining that component as well, as that our beverages don't have anything in them that is going to create that psychoactive effect that alcohol or a THC beverage would. They
Yeah.
just have a functional ingredients in there that are going to benefit your body in a variety of different ways. So that's kind of been the way that we explain it on a very basic level. And then obviously it depends on the consumer, right? So if there's
Yeah.
consumers who have a lot of nutrition education or background, or they're very interested in things like supplements or functionals or overall health and wellness, they've oftentimes heard of a lot of the ingredients that can be found in our beverages and they just want more details. And then you have your consumers who have never heard of these ingredients before at all. And it kind of is more that basic answer to start with and then dive into deeper education if they inquire. But it's actually been really interesting to watch our statistics through our Shopify, because
Yeah.
actually our biggest seller regions right now are the Midwest.
It's
And I
great.
do think, obviously, me being a content creator and having a lot of
Yeah.
local following within like Des Moines, Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, all of kind of the surrounding states, I think that's definitely contributed to the fact that we have that like big Midwest presence, I guess you
Yeah.
could say. But I think as these continue to expand, especially out to the West, I think we're going to see a lot of people really understanding what's in these beverages, because it is like you're saying, those trends are just so much more common. Like
Yeah.
when we went to California and we went to Erewhon, it's like
Yeah.
there is every functional beverage that you can imagine under the sun, and they have that beautiful pretty beverage cooler that you can look at. So I think within the Midwest, definitely a little bit more of that education side of things. But I think as we continue to expand and as the trends continue to shift, I think these things are going to become just more common and people are going to know
Yeah.
more about them because of the way in which trends are shifting.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. I mean, I personally love it that you guys are starting in the Midwest. Not only, obviously, that's where you're from and that's where the company is based, but it's also where you can have the biggest impact and
Mhm.
where you can get as upstream as possible. Because the reality is, on the coast, there are um, tens of 20, hundreds of these beverages now, right? That are all kind of competing with each other. And so I think it's actually a power that you guys have, that you're not in the thick of that at the very beginning stages. You can build a presence elsewhere. So for someone who's never heard of an adaptogen, I want to go through that. So you have these different functions that are modeled
Mhm.
after alcoholic drinks, which is brilliant, right? So
Mhm.
you have one for the evening to unwind, one to kick back, one to uplift, which would be like kind of like a replacement for a tequila or something that, and people that are used to drinking cocktails or wine or whatever understand that feeling, right? And that's
Mhm.
the danger of alcohol, is that they crave that feeling, right? So instead,
Mhm.
your positioning with these beverages is to replace those need states. I say that in quotes,
Mhm.
right? But replace those sort of instinctual kind of cravings for alcohol with a beverage that uses adaptogens instead of alcohol to really try
Yep.
and hit the same need. So if
Mhm.
someone's never heard of an adaptogen, what is it? And how
Mhm.
does an adaptogen work in the body positively versus negatively
Mhm.
like alcohol does?
Yeah, so the most basic way that we like to talk about adaptogens are the fact that they help your body adapt in stressful situations. So our beverages contain a wide variety of adaptogenic mushrooms. One of the most common ones that people have probably heard of is lion's mane. That one has been
Yep.
popular for quite a while. That one is actually found in our Lift beverage. And
Yeah.
so lion's mane can help with focus and a variety of other things. The other really cool thing about adaptogens is the fact that because they help your body adapt to stressful situations by the mechanisms in which they perform in the body, the more often and the more frequently that you consume them, the more that they benefit you.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, that's why a lot of people will take lion's mane daily, because the longer that you take that lower dose of something like a lion's mane, the more benefit that it provides to your body and
Mm.
the more that you actually feel the sensation, quote unquote, that it's supposed to create. So those are kind of the adaptogen components. So in our lift, we have that adaptogenic mushroom of lion's mane. In kickback, we have the adaptogenic mushroom of cordyceps. And then Zach has all of them. Look at you.
I'm ready.
And then in unwind, we have the adaptogenic mushroom of reishi. So
Cool.
each of those is kind of meant to help with those sensations in which the drink is named for. Now, the
Cool.
other components that we have in there are nootropics, vitamins, minerals, these other things that can also help. So, like, for example, in that unwind, the Sleepy Girl mocktail, we have that tart cherry extract, right? So,
Mhm.
that tart cherry extract is going to help the body create more natural melatonin to help you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer, which the goal there is to give you deeper REM sleep. What we know
Mhm.
about alcohol is that while it might help you fall asleep faster, right? Like there's a lot of people who get really sleepy after a glass of wine. If you look at any sort of like data, like an Aura Ring or a Whoop, right? All of these fitness
Yeah.
devices, I think that's another reason that Gen Z is also more conscious of alcohol because let me tell you, my Aura Ring made me feel really bad every time that
Yeah.
I would see my statistics. But what we know about alcohol is that it might help you fall asleep. However, when we look at statistics like that, people don't actually get deep, high quality sleep, which is
Mhm.
why oftentimes you still wake up feeling groggy or, an upset stomach, all of these different things, right? So that's kind of how these adaptogens and nootropics work in the body in comparison, is they provide more of that benefit to your body
Mhm.
versus while alcohol may create that temporary sensation that feels good in the moment, the next day, even after, well, this is maybe just as you get older, even after one or two drinks, you're probably still going to feel some of those negative effects that alcohol is going to do to your body.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll kind of piggyback off of that too. Kind of what Taylor's saying there on the benefits of these adaptogens. I mean, I think one reason why we found so much traction in the market is because with these alcohol imitation products,
Mm.
it's often not enough for a lot of these like Gen Z or millennials to not just or to only take out the alcohol and just have like a non-alcoholic beer or wine or spirit, whatever. Like that's great. And that's going to give you the look of drinking an alcoholic beverage, but there's no benefit. So like for
Right.
us adding these adaptogenic mushrooms and other ingredients, that's not only going to take away the bad, but add something good and beneficial for your body. I think that's why this resonates with so many people.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that I wanted to talk about too here, which we're hitting on, is that these adaptogens are really helpful with recovery.
Hmm.
And I'm not just talking like hardcore athletic recovery,
Hmm.
but two words that mean a lot to our generation and mean a lot to society more and more, but definitely to Gen Z, are sleep and stress. And these are two words that unfortunately we are just a very sleepless generation, and so is Gen Z. It's very difficult, and it really is, a lot of it is due to lights, our circadian biology being completely off, and then it's technology, right? I mean, those things alone are huge factors, and then you add in alcohol, right? So I mean, it's like it's a perfect combination, a perfect mix. But then also stress, just stress throughout the day, right? And this is, again, there's a lot of reasons for this, but all of these things, so sleep and stress and then alcohol, these things are really wreaking havoc on our hormone health. And I know women are specifically really taking a deeper look, and men are too right now, but they're caring more about their hormone health, whether that's just like regulating their cycle, whether that's trying to prepare to have kids someday, whether it's just they're just trying to figure out how to not feel like crap and gain weight. So let's talk about that a little bit. Maybe Taylor, if you want to take a stab at this, on how these adaptogens are really beneficial for sleep, stress. You're talking, talk about serotonin, dopamine, melatonin, all of these words that are
Hmm.
meaningful with our hormone health, and kind of how
Hmm.
you can reverse the narrative of alcohol. And I understand we don't want to shame and tell someone they can never have alcohol, but it is so important that someone understands what happens when they drink, right? And that you
Yeah.
understand what happens to your sleep, what happens to your hormone cycle, all of these things. So let's take a stab at that, and how we, can think through kind of reversing that and actually healing the hormones versus hurting them with alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah. So our hormones, right? Some of these things like serotonin, dopamine for women, estrogen, progesterone for men, testosterone, all of these different things. One, I want to say that when you're talking about a sleepless generation, is that something that I work on with clients in private practice is one of the first things we establish is how are you sleeping?
Yeah.
Now, I have a 6 month old, you are pregnant, and then also have I think you said 20-month old
Yeah.
now. So, those are situations where
Take
obviously
those, take us aside.
take those out of the equation, because let's just be real, if you're a mom, you're probably not
Yeah.
getting as good of sleep as you could be.
Yeah.
However, sleep hygiene is something that
Mhm.
is so incredibly important in terms of our hormone health and our hormone regulation. The way in which our body recovers and also creates hormones throughout the course of the night based on your deep and restorative sleep. Your body
Mhm.
cannot do that if you are not getting that deep and restorative sleep. And this plays into everything that follows the next day. Something that
Mhm.
I talk about in terms of food with a lot of people is the regulation of like ghrelin and leptin, for example. So that's
Yeah.
your hunger and your fullness hormone. If you have poor sleep, you are going to have an upregulation in your ghrelin hormone and you're going to have a downregulation in your leptin hormone. So that's satisfaction. Upregulation in hunger, downregulation in satisfaction. That in turn oftentimes leads to people consuming more ultra processed foods, leads to you
Mhm.
consuming more alcohol, leads to you consuming more of these things throughout the day, and then in turn causes you to sleep poorly again. And that is a cycle that continues for, unfortunately, a lot of people because they don't necessarily realize how many things are dependent on that high quality sleep
Yeah.
hygiene. So I think that's also probably why Unwind is actually our best seller, because the
Mhm.
amount of people that we have seen that have significantly improved. That's what's also really cool about having some of these data things now, like
Yeah.
the Aura Ring or the Whoop, is actually being able to see people's data improve when they're consuming our beverages. We've had many people send us scores like above 80, 90
Mhm.
on their Aura Rings or on their Whoops after previously getting like below 80 in the 70s, even 60s for their sleep scores, and seeing such an improvement from consuming that. And a lot of the background of the drinks and how they actually impact your body just came from my education as a registered dietitian and
Yeah.
understanding what combinations of ingredients were going to give that sensation that we were looking for. And so, for example, with the tart cherry Shirley or the Unwind, that one has that tart cherry extract, which is going to help to increase the melatonin, but your body's natural melatonin. That's
Yeah.
going to help you sleep longer and sleep hopefully deeper throughout the night, which in turn hopefully regulates some of those hunger and fullness hormones. When we have more regulated hunger and fullness hormones, we have more regulated blood sugar. When we have more regulated blood sugar, we have more regulated insulin.
Mhm.
Insulin's another really hot topic, I think, in the world of fertility and women's
Yeah.
health or PCOS or all of these different things, because insulin resistance is
Yeah.
also something that's very, very prevalent, which basically just means that your insulin, which is what helps to get glucose or carbohydrates into your cells to use them for energy, it doesn't work the way that it should. That
Yeah.
leads to high levels of circulating blood sugar, which can then negatively impact a variety of other hormones,
Mhm.
especially for us as females in terms of like our cycle health and our fertility. So I think the biggest thing here is figuring out what ingredients do we want to include in these beverages that are going to benefit people from a variety of different perspectives, but also just help people improve kind of some of these basic things
Yeah.
that cascade into one another, right? Because if we can potentially get someone sleeping a little bit better, we can potentially help their hunger and fullness hormones, which might help insulin resistance. Like that whole goal is to help people live healthier, better lives overall.
Yeah.
And I think now I'm kind of just on like a tangent there, but that it's just crazy how when we talk about hormone health, everything plays
Yeah.
into each other.
Well, and I think that's, there's a direct correlation between alcohol and consumption of alcohol and a negative impact on
Mhm.
sleep and stress and then hormone health. But
Yep.
um, it is why I think we're seeing this generation pull back and remove it, or at least be very cautious of the decision and knowing, okay, this is what it does. But there's definitely a change in behavior, and the data shows, right? I mean, the
Mhm.
alcohol sales show this is why you're seeing White Claw now with a non-alcoholic White Claw. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, this wouldn't have crossed our minds 10 years ago, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and it's happening really fast. This market's
Mhm.
shifting really fast, but they're still wanting a function out of it. One of the reasons I think probably I can count on one hand of how many times I've ordered a mocktail, even throughout pregnancies, has been because of the sugar. It's like I'd rather have an
Mhm.
iced tea with no sugar or a sparkling water or just water because it's like the sugar is awful. And so let's talk about that because the combination of how um, it is uniquely American, I will say. I mean, it happens in other regions, but there's a uniquely American combination of alcohol and sugar. If you guys remember Four
Mhm.
Loco, which was then taken off the market because it was
Oh,
lethal.
do I remember it? Yeah.
So
Do you
this is a
remember it though?
lethal combination of this sugar and alcohol, and so a lot of reasons why I think the other reason, and women and men, but it tends to be women will pull back on drinking or don't want to drink is weight, right? They don't want to gain weight, and
Mhm.
Zach, obviously, your diabetes diagnosis totally plays into this conversation around sugar and alcohol and the combination, but um, you guys maybe address that of how alcohol does impact metabolism, weight, and weight gain and causes that because again I think it's very important to be kind of honest with the implications of what alcohol is doing to our body.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, alcohol impairs nutrient absorption at the gut level. So
Mm,
essentially, we have this protein that's called zonulin. Zonulin is what helps to open and close these gap junctions that exist in our gut microbiome. Essentially, we want those gap junctions to stay tight because when they start to open up, things are able to come out of our gut and get into our bloodstream, get into our body. That can be different inflammatory markers, that can be different toxins, that can be a variety of things. We want to keep those tight junctions tight. But alcohol increases that zonulin or that protein. And as zonulin increases, those tight junctions get less and less tight, and there's more openings for those types of inflammatory things to come out and get into your body. Now, what we also know is that with those tight junctions and that inflammation happening within the body, there is also a lack of nutrient absorption and then also a decrease in digestive enzyme creation. So, digestive enzymes are what actually help to break down the food that we're consuming so that we're able, kind of think about like lactose, for example. So, that's the sugar that can be found in milk products. The enzyme that we have is called lactase. What lactase does is when we eat lactose, it's this big long molecule, right? If that long molecule gets into our digestive tract and into our colon and we don't break it down into smaller molecules, it's going to cause a lot of bloating, a lot of digestive upset. We're not going to feel very good. So those digestive enzymes are crucial for actually breaking down our food for us to be able to utilize it and for us to be able to convert it into the energy that we want our food to be converted into. Also, with the nutrient absorption component and all of these things with alcohol kind of playing into that gut permeability and
yeah.
affecting the digestive enzymes, comes the actual micronutrient absorption. So things like B vitamins or zinc or magnesium, some of these really crucial things that play a role in our immune health, our energy levels, our metabolism. Those things are absorbed at a much lower level because of the way that alcohol is impacting our digestive system. Not to mention that I can't remember this exact. I learned it in my metabolism class in college. It was actually one of the things that made me in college drink a lot less than I was
Yeah.
previously in college. But it also impairs the way in which we're actually able to absorb and digest carbohydrates and our
Yeah.
brain's perceived thought around fuel. So essentially, our
Mm,
body, alcohol has calories, right? But it has no nutrients. So we're consuming calories, but we're not getting any nutrients. Because we're not getting any nutrients, our brain is essentially perceiving that there's a lack of energy. Because
mhm,
of that, we're going to have an upregulation in that ghrelin or that hunger hormone because our brain, although we have a bunch of calories coming in, is perceiving that we don't have any energy or nutrients coming in. So
mm,
that's also why a lot of people will drunk eat or the following day will feel like they are a bottomless pit and you can't stop eating, but also your stomach is really
yeah.
upset. So oftentimes you're choosing things that are more ultra processed, things that are more greasy. You're oftentimes not choosing the most nutrient dense or mindful option that's actually going to help you feel better because what your gut actually needs is some of those vitamins and minerals and nutrients that you lost from the consumption of the alcohol. But it's really hard to eat like avocado toast when your stomach is in knots. So
Yeah.
that's kind of all of the ways in which alcohol can negatively impact from a variety of levels. And as you can see, most of it is at that gut level that then influences a variety of other pathways in the body.
Well said, Taylor. Zach, anything else you'd add to that?
Zach's just like, okay, and yep.
Yeah.
I let Taylor run with a lot of these responses because she is the science behind all of this, and as you can tell, she knows what she's talking about. So,
What has
yeah,
shocked you, Zach? I mean, because if you were to take the standard consumption of 7 to 10 drinks a week, you stop drinking, you start drinking a Pesche, something more functional. What has surprised you as far as what benefits people are seeing and kind of how quickly they're sharing, like how much they're feeling better? What is, because I think this is the other thing too, is that if someone swaps for their alcohol or stops drinking alcohol, they're always curious, and then add on the level of kind of these adaptogens, how quickly do they work? But what's the feedback that you guys are getting, and what do we know scientifically about how quickly adaptogens can work in the body?
yeah, and I think I'll kind of share what we're seeing at a very basic level, and if Taylor
Yeah.
wants to get into the science behind it, she's more than welcome to.
Yeah.
But I think kind of like what we've said with our, I guess, if you want to call it our flagship product, Unwind, our bestseller,
Yeah.
a lot of the feedback has just been the great sleep and recovery you start to feel when you do, start to wean off the alcohol and maybe start to put in more beneficial ingredients into your body, right? I mean, sleep is at the basis of your health, really, and you're going to see improvements in your cognitive performance. I mean, I'm going to share some of like my own
Yeah.
personal observations as well. Is like I think there's, and correct me if I'm wrong, Taylor, but I think there's a direct correlation between like your gut health and your mental state as well. So it's like you start to see, for myself, it was like a lot of kind of that anxiety or hangxiety, whatever you want to say, that's associated with alcohol intake, starts to decrease less and less and less. You're feeling better mentally, feeling better physically. For me, my workouts, I can't tell you how many times where I have a drink at dinner on the weekend, and that whole next week
Yeah.
I can feel it in my workouts. I'm slacking. I'm not putting up as much weight. I'm not running as well. Whatever you want to say. So I think for me, and kind of what we heard from some of our consumers is just like the overall benefit in the better sleep you get, which then
Mm.
leads to better gut health, better cognitive performance, better physical
Yeah.
performance. I mean, it's just honestly, it's a snowball once you start to stack like those small little habits.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing for us that we're receiving a lot of good feedback on, and just being able to take any opportunity you can to swap out alcohol for something that's actually beneficial for you is a really, really positive impact for our consumers.
Yeah, and I kind of have two things. Number one of my like favorite results stories, I guess you could say, was a mom of two under two sent
Mm.
me her resilience score. So she had
Mm.
been drinking Kickback and Unwind pretty consistently. So Kickback is kind of that middle ground one that honestly, really the goal of Kickback is to just reduce your overall stress levels and
Yeah.
just kind of chill, rejuvenate, all of that. And then obviously Unwind is to help with sleep. And so she sent me the actual data on her Aura ring of her resilience. So Aura now tracks like your stress levels and then creates a
Mm.
resilience score. So after 2 weeks of consuming Pesches, she wasn't drinking them every day, but she said pretty consistently over the course of the week, like 3 to 4 times over the course of the week, kind of swapping back and forth between that Kickback and Unwind. She saw a significant reduction in her stress levels, an uptick in her resilience, and improved sleep scores. And
So
so
cool.
that was really cool to see the actual data. And then obviously her being a mom, I don't have two under two. I just have one who's doesn't sleep. But it was just really cool to relate on that
Yeah.
level of being like, I understand how stressed and tired a lot of the times moms are, especially working really busy moms. So to see those things be able to significantly improve and for her to feel those things,
Yeah.
I think that was a really cool story that we heard. And then, like we said, a lot of the other data has kind of come from seeing those improved sleep scores, or then kind of in turn with that, the resilience scores, or even just the overall, what is Aura called? Your readiness score, also
Yeah.
showing improvements as well. And then I wrote down, because I was looking through the questions that you sent and I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that I touched on all of these, of within 30 days of removing 7 to 10 drinks, the ways that that
Yeah.
can impact your body. So we think about the 30 days from like dry January or
Yep.
sober October, right? Like those
Yep.
are really big trends. So we have reduced gut permeability, so lower zonulin, that protein, so a tighter
Yeah.
gap junction, which means you're going to overall have less inflammation in your gut, improved digestion, so less bloating, not to get gross, but more bowel movements is obviously another good thing that we want to be happening. And that comes from the fact that your body's able to regulate that enzyme production a lot better with that reduction in alcohol. So you can break down your food a lot better. You gain more of those nutrients that are actually coming from the food that you're eating. Better insulin sensitivity. So we talked about that insulin resistance, where your insulin is not doing its job as well of getting that glucose into the cells to use as energy. Insulin sensitivity is the reverse of that. Our body becomes more sensitive to insulin, which means that the glucose is out of our bloodstream and it's into our cells, which is much better because we're actually using it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the goal of insulin. Lower blood pressure and resting heart rate were other ones that we see a decrease in. Better sleep, which we've talked
Yeah.
ad nauseam, which we've talked plenty about, of how that creates the downstream metabolic improvements across the board. Clearer skin coming from reduced
Yeah.
inflammation. Personally, that's one thing that I have noticed. I
Yeah.
look back at some of the pictures of me from college. I feel like I look 10 years older in college than I do now at almost 30 years old, which
This is
is
a big
crazy.
one for women too, that they
Yeah.
don't realize this. It's the
Hmm.
inflammation, the puffy skin, but it's the
Yes.
long-term impact that it has on your skin
Yes.
and aging,
Yes.
right? And the
Hmm.
whole anti-aging culture. So I'm glad you hit on that, because the long-term stress that it plays on the body really takes a very, very significant toll on your skin.
It just comes from the fact that alcohol creates so much of that oxidative stress in our
Yeah.
body. So there's just so much inflammation, and that can be seen in so many different places. But I think for women specifically, you really can see it on our faces a lot
Yeah.
of the times. Like I look back and the amount of wrinkles, the amount of puffiness that I had,
Yep.
like I looked like a completely different person and I was only 21 years old, but
Yeah.
I was drinking a lot more alcohol. And so
Yeah.
now not drinking at all, it's crazy because I don't do any sort of, well, I'm breastfeeding, so no Botox, no nothing.
Yeah.
And my skin looks 10,000 times better than it did when I was 21 years old, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And then also on average, there's a 1 to 4 pound weight loss that's simply from
Mm.
physiology. So from getting better sleep, from better metabolic outputs, from better digestion, it has nothing to do with restriction or caloric deficits. It's just by simply cutting alcohol, the way that your body physiologically handles food and nutrients and exercise so much better can lead to just a 1 to 4 pound weight loss on average over the course of that 30 days of abstinence from alcohol.
And that's not even to mention, like you were saying, what happens with the hunger hormones when you are drinking or hungover, and the likelihood of kind of binge eating terrible foods, right? So, I mean,
Mhm.
that's there is your pitch, if anyone's listening to this, to do 30 days without alcohol and to swap in Pesche instead. One other thing I wanted to touch on that, just kind of comes to mind as we're talking through this, is that I think it's a good thing. I think it's a net positive. There's this whole kind of alcohol related health category that is growing. And a couple of the products and some of the, angles are supplementation. So taking a supplement, before you drink, or taking a supplement after your last drink. I think at the end of the day, I mean, my read on it is that it's probably just best to overall just reduce or eliminate alcohol consumption. That's the end of the
Mhm.
day. But there are very popular supplements right now that are kind of all around this alcohol related health, some in the probiotic space. So I don't know if you've got any opinions of those, or just feedback on, Taylor, how those even work if someone's curious. There's a lot of these that are popular on TikTok and social media in general, of, again, either there's a pre-alcohol, I've seen that the pre-alcohol supplements, and then there's also supplements that you take kind of after your last drink, which, again, if you're drinking a lot, the likelihood of remembering that, I mean, and all of that, those kinds of nuances seem to be difficult or unlikely.
Yeah. I'm gonna be totally transparent. I don't know. I know what you're talking about, but I
Yeah.
don't know a ton about the ingredients that
Yeah.
they include in them. If I had to make like an educated guess, it would be the fact that when you drink alcohol, it breaks down into acetaldehyde, and
Yep.
acetaldehyde is the toxic substance. So that's
Yep.
what actually circulates in our bloodstream. And when you are binge drinking or drinking more than one drink per hour, is what they say it takes for your liver to essentially detoxify that acetaldehyde. That acetaldehyde builds up in your bloodstream, and then that's what causes you to feel drunk. But then that's what also causes you to feel hungover,
Mhm.
because you have that toxic substance in your body and your liver is trying to detoxify it and get it out of your body, but it can't keep up with the amount of acetaldehyde that is circulating within your bloodstream. And so that's also why, like, hair of the dog doesn't really work. It's
Yeah.
more so just you're kind of feeding that acetaldehyde and feeding all of those things, which then in turn your body doesn't feel as terrible because you're not detoxing it
Yeah.
anymore. So my assumption would be that what they probably include in a lot of those supplements is just liver detoxification support supplements,
Mm.
to help your body process that alcohol. Is it going to help your body process that alcohol any faster? I'm honestly not sure
Yeah.
if it actually works or not. I would say, kind of like you said, the best thing you can probably do is either eliminate or just reduce your overall alcohol
Mhm.
consumption. I mean, that's something that we've even said with Pesche as well, is in order to become like a more mindful drinker, notice how many alcoholic beverages kind of gets you to that tipping point of just really feeling terrible for the next day, the next week, whatever it is. And so let's say for someone that's like their third beverage, maybe have two alcoholic beverages and then swap that last beverage with something like a Pesche or even a
Mhm.
sparkling water. Like, I have some sort of like hydrating component, right? That's
Yeah.
going to make you feel better. Of course, we'd love for you to do a Pesche, but just saying, if you can kind of swap or reduce even that overall alcohol consumption that tips you over the edge, I think that's going to lead to you feeling a lot better than taking any of those hangover pills.
Yeah, and the other kind of adjacent category to what you guys are doing, which we tapped on earlier in the conversation, are all of these CBD beverages, right?
Mm-hmm.
So beverages that have cannabis in them, and from my understanding, I'm not an expert in this at all, but there's varying levels of quality, of strength, all of these
Mm-hmm.
things. I find it very confusing. Obviously, the regulatory is confusing as
Yep.
well because it's really regional, state to state. Distribution is difficult. There's a lot to it.
Mm-hmm.
How would you just explain kind of Peche's difference, and how do you kind of approach, if you do have a strong opinion whether or not that's a good thing or not, CBD beverages, how you approach the sort of functional added benefits, and kind of differentiation between what Pesce is doing and some of the CBD beverages?
Yeah, so I think Pesce, we've actually talked about this a little bit with some of the businesses that we've talked to and kind of pitched to in terms of carrying Pesce,
Yeah.
is it's a really good middle of the ground beverage in the non-alcoholic space. In terms of kind of the two spectrums of the non-alcoholic space are the non-alcoholic beers, the non-alcoholic wines, or the mocktails, right? They don't really provide any sort of benefit to your body. There's no function to them, but they are giving that sense that you have a fun beverage that feels like you're drinking without alcohol. But a
Mhm.
lot of them, like we've said, are still loaded with sugar, still loaded with calories, a lot of things that just don't provide benefit to your body. On the other end of that spectrum, in the non alcoholic space, we have a lot of these THC and CBD beverages,
Mhm.
which can be a good alternative for people who are wanting to cut back on their alcohol intake if that's something that they enjoy doing. However, there are still a lot of people who don't feel comfortable with THC because,
Yeah.
like you said, there's a lot of regulations around it. I will say that there's also, when it comes to like the regulatory factors of producing it, it should be third party tested for a lot of these companies. And there are a lot of companies that don't necessarily follow that regulation of doing third party testing, and they don't have to, right? Third party
Mhm.
testing is an optional thing. It's optional for supplements and it's optional for beverages. It's optional for all of these types of things. But what that really means is just that there's a higher standard for how the THC or the Delta 9 is kind of another like substance that's added to a lot of
Mhm.
these, that's kind of like a THC adjacent. And then CBD, making sure that those are actually being produced and put into the beverage in the way that they are saying that they are. So having that third party testing is really important. And so I think that's where Pesce kind of like bridges that gap between those two spectrums of non alcoholic beverages, because it still fits into this mocktail space and a
Yeah.
beverage that still provides you with some sort of sensation, because That's why a lot of people like the THC beverages too, is that they
Yes.
still provide that sensation, right? Like alcohol, they're looking for that feeling. So that was kind of the goal with Pesce, is to be that middle ground beverage where we're adding benefit to the drink without putting in any sort of psychoactive substance like a THC. Now, CBD is not a psychoactive substance either. That can still just be like a beneficial substance for your body. But I would say that what I see more often is like a THC and CBD combination beverage
Right.
as compared to just a CBD beverage. They exist for sure, but I think in terms of like what's being filled in the non-alcoholic space is more so those like THC combination beverages.
Is there any
Yeah.
concern? I mean, and maybe Zach, you could take this, but like for either of you, I mean, because THC is not an insignificant drug, it's significant. And there's a
Mhm.
lot of studies around mental health, schizophrenia, all of these things with THC. It's serious. My concern, I'll just speak plainly, is that if you have these THC beverages that are strong enough and are giving you this, it's no better than alcohol. It could be worse, frankly. I mean, and especially like driving on them and everything else. I mean, it's very dangerous, right? So, I mean, is there any concern in kind of the normalization of this as a healthier beverage when really it's swapping kind of one for another that are still could be potentially impacting your body in negative ways?
Right. Yeah. And I think, the regulatory state of THC around the country and the legalization of it, we're actually starting now to get some like clearer data and studies on like
Yeah,
maybe some of the more negative benefits of it.
yeah,
But one thing that I think about too with the THC beverages, and kind of tailing off of what Taylor was saying, is like, don't get me wrong, I love to enjoy a THC beverage every once in a while.
yeah,
But for me, if I'm looking for, let's say, an alcohol replacement, where I would normally be drinking alcohol, I'm looking for something that's going to help me be social, maybe
yeah,
get me going a little bit, lift my spirits, have a little bit of caffeine in there to help me
yeah,
socialize. Um, for me, a THC beverage is like, I want to sit on the couch, watch a movie, and eat some ice cream, right? I'm
yeah,
not very
right.
social. So I think that's one thing too that's really beneficial with these adaptogens and functional ingredients, is like, it's not only going to, benefit your body, but it's going to help you socialize, help you, be a part of multiple conversations, be able to go to different parties and not want to go to bed or go to sleep. Plus, to your point, it's like, well, you don't want to drive on THC, you get a DUI. It's like, you
Yeah.
don't have to worry about that with any of these ingredients that we're putting into our beverages. So I think that's where we stand out comparative to a THC beverage. And I think that's why a lot of people will gravitate towards that as opposed to like THC in social situations specifically.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, kind of one thing just sort of to wrap it up here too, but one thing that comes to mind is there's a reason why there's so much demand to pull back from alcohol. There's a reason. I mean, people aren't feeling good. They're not. I mean, if you look at the state of health in America, like, just not feeling good. There's just a lot of issues that are going on. I mean, for these younger generations, for us, we're kind of preaching to our own choir here, even with our peer groups. There's a lot of sleep issues, a lot of stress issues, but then there's a number of other issues going on, right? There's a lot of obesities, there's pre-diabetes, there's a lot of issues that Americans are dealing with. And so this switch away from alcohol that we're seeing kind of, and I would just say crazy numbers because they are, especially with these younger generations, you know, it's for good reason. People don't feel good, they're not feeling good. And so I would just say, one question to ask you guys is, in addition, as we head into the holidays and then specifically the new year, there's this, inevitable time where people are going to be looking at, how do I make myself better, which I think is a great opportunity every year for companies like both of ours to, communicate to people that are looking for resources. But someone's looking to do either like a dry January or just start with 30 days of not drinking. What are some of the other things too that you guys would encourage them to do? So, I mean, kind of some of the practical tips here. Obviously, we're talking about alcohol, removing alcohol from the diet, or at least reducing alcohol from the diet, replacing it with something that's better. But what are some of the other things, Taylor, that you would say, or kind of if you were to give some advice to a client of yours,
Mhm.
that they could do for 30 days that would really transform how they're feeling?
Yeah, so I kind of base my practice around what I like to call the four pillars of health. So, nutrition, movement, sleep, and stress management.
Mhm.
And I always like to tell people, don't try to tackle all of those four pillars at one time because that's going to feel very overwhelming. think about, when you think about those four pillars, where are you struggling the most? Are you
Mhm.
struggling in nutrition? Are you struggling in movement? Are you struggling in stress management? Or are you struggling in sleep? Pick the one where you're struggling the most and create small attainable goals. So for example, if you're someone who right now you're going to sleep at like midnight and you have to get
Mhm.
up at 6 a.m. for work, that's only getting you, 6 hours of sleep. So swap out, let's say you're watching TV till midnight. Can we swap the last half an hour that you're normally watching TV for something like reading a book
Yeah.
or some sort of wind down routine? And can you move your bedtime back progressively by 15 minutes over the course of multiple weeks? So like the first week you'd go to bed at 11:45, second week 11:30, till you get to the point that you're getting more of that like 7 or 8 hours of sleep. Because if you're someone who goes to bed at midnight and you try going to bed at 9, you're not going to fall asleep. So
Yeah.
progressively make those small habits and changes. And then if with nutrition and movement, what I oftentimes will recommend to people, think about addition versus restriction. So if
Mhm.
you look at your overall diet, what are you lacking in? Are you not getting in enough protein? Are you not maybe getting in enough fiber or, fruits and vegetables? How can you add those things to things that you're already eating? So like let's say you oftentimes take a breakfast sandwich with you to work and it has eggs and it has cheese and maybe it has bacon on it, for example. Can we add maybe some spinach and some avocado to that? That's going to
Yeah.
add some fiber. That's going to add some micronutrition. Can we make these small little things? Because what I see a lot in the health and wellness industry is that people think so deeply about what they need to take away or what they need to restrict or
Right.
cut out. And that leads to a negative mindset around
Yeah.
health and wellness. So instead, when we think about it from these small attainable habits and then also think about it from the perspective of what can I add to my
Mhm.
lifestyle, that makes a huge difference. And I know we've talked a lot about glucose and,
Yeah.
insulin sensitivity and all of these things. There's a lot of really interesting data coming out about how 10 minutes of walking after you
Mhm.
eat a meal can significantly reduce your blood sugar levels. So what I tell a lot of my clients who are super busy, they work a corporate job, they have kids. I'm like, if you cannot carve out 30 minutes of your day to get in movement, try to do a 10-minute walk after each meal. Whether
Yeah.
that's you have a walking pad and you work from home, you walk circles around your office if you're able
Yeah.
to, or you have, it's warm out, you have a walking trail near your office. Can you just do 3 10-minute walks at some point during your day? Even better if you can do them after your meals. So it's about creating these small attainable goals in each of those categories. And those things are what's going to help to propel your health forward rather than just thinking about health and wellness from that weight loss perspective. Because I think that's what leads people
Yeah.
to that restriction mindset as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that same philosophy can be true with alcohol, right? If
Mhm.
someone is, sober curious or it's just listening to this and it's like, I understand, I get it. There's all these negative impacts. I get how it impacts my body, but I'm having a really hard time stopping,
Mhm.
right? What would you say to someone like that? How could they, start to incorporate Pesche and start to make some responsible swaps?
Yeah, I mean, even kind of that example that I gave earlier of like when you start to become more of a mindful drinker, noticing kind of how many drinks oftentimes lead you to really not feeling your best the next
Yeah.
day. Can you swap out that last drink with a Pesche? Can you swap
Mhm.
out that last drink with something else just to help you start to get used to like not having as many alcoholic beverages? And I think it even kind of plays back into that bedtime thing, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're someone who's going to bed at midnight and you try to go to bed at 9 p.m. one day, it's not going to work. If you're someone who is currently I know there are a lot of people who quit drinking cold turkey and they have no issue with it. But if you're having a hard, challenging time with cutting back on alcohol or quitting drinking, I think number one is finding these swaps that still help you get that sensation that you're looking for with alcohol, like a Pesce beverage, and or just making those small incremental swaps over a period of time rather than just going cold turkey. Because the other thing is sometimes if you're very used to it and you go cold turkey and you set a goal of like 30 days, it can then end up leading to overindulgence on whatever
Yeah.
it is that you cut out after those 30 days are over.
Yeah.
So I'd much rather you slowly reduce your intake over time if that's going to be something that's actually sustainable for you long term rather than just abstinence in the short term.
Totally. Yeah, that's a perfect way to tie up the conversation. That's what we want to see happen, right? You want to see sustainable change versus kind of these binge trends back and forth. But
Yes.
Thank you guys so much. I mean, for anyone who's just wondering where they can try Pesche, where they can find you guys, where are the beverages currently available?
Yeah, I would say right now the best way to purchase Pesche is through our website,
Awesome.
drinkpesche.com. If you're in Iowa, specifically central Iowa, we have a
Okay,
handful of different restaurants and health clubs that do sell Pesche.
cool.
Um, we do have some exciting news coming up in 2026 as far as a larger retail presence.
Awesome.
More to come on that. But yeah, right now, drinkpesche.com, and you can follow us at drinkpesche on Instagram and TikTok.
And we do have a
Awesome.
TikTok shop as well, so you can
Great.
purchase via TikTok shop as well. If that's
Yep.
something, if that's a place where you find yourself purchasing more often, we do have a TikTok shop.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to the Gut Check podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a comment below. Let us know what you think, like the episode, and share it with friends and family who may also benefit from learning about these important and educational health and wellness topics. You can find the Gut Check podcast on YouTube, also on Spotify, Instagram, and TikTok. The Gut Check podcast is brought to you by our team at Daily Nori. Daily Nori makes probiotic and prebiotic solutions accessible to all because good health starts with gut health. To learn more about Daily Nori, please go to www.dailynori.com. Thank you.